Ever since I was a kid, I'd been a menace. I got expelled from college for fighting, spent my days loafing around, starting trouble, and driving my parents' blood pressure through the roof. Eventually, they reached their limit, pooled their savings, bought me a secondhand apartment, and kicked me out so they could finally have some peace. I moved in feeling freer than I had in years and already wondering what kind of fun I could stir up next. Then the people across the hall delivered themselves to me like a gift. That was when I realized I'd run into a whole family of bastards. And for the first time in a long time, I was thrilled. Because I might have been a bastard too, but I was better at it. At first, it started small. They kept piling garbage bags outside their door and leaving them there for days until building staff finally got so fed up they hauled the mess away themselves. I ignored it at first. But one Sunday morning I opened my door and nearly gagged. The hallway reeked. Whatever they had in those bags had gone past rotten. It smelled like somebody had left eggs to die in the sun. I saw red and started pounding on their door. A woman answered. I said, "Move your trash." She looked me up and down and snapped, "Who do you think you are?" The second I heard her tone, I knew exactly what kind of people I was dealing with. I smiled. Then I bent down, grabbed the garbage bag, and flung it right into their apartment. She screamed like I'd set the place on fire and immediately started cursing me out. A second later her husband came stomping over, some greasy fat guy with yellow teeth and murder in his eyes. Without a word, he stormed into the kitchen and came back with a cleaver. For one brief moment, even I almost got nervous. But only almost. I leaned my neck forward and said, "Go ahead. Swing. What, you can't? Then don't act tough." He got so mad I really thought he might do it. His wife must have realized I wasn't normal either, because she rushed to hold him back, screaming in my face the whole time. I screamed right back. I unleashed 20 years worth of filth, every insult I'd ever learned, and gave them all of it. Then my dog came out barking. The man lifted the cleaver and shouted that he'd kill the mutt too. So I scooped my dog into my arms, stepped closer, and told him to try. That was the moment I stopped being angry and started getting interested. Later that day I found out from one of the aunties downstairs that the husband owned a flower, bird, and pet shop, the wife sold clothes, and they were doing pretty well for themselves. That oversized SUV always parked in the entrance lane, the Toyota Land Cruiser, theirs. I thanked the auntie, acted like I was over it, and walked away. But by then I had already decided. Finding a worthy opponent wasn't easy, and I was going to enjoy ruining them. The very next day, they doubled down. I opened my door and found 7 or 8 massive bags of trash stacked in the hallway, blocking half the corridor. The old lady downstairs had told me earlier I could complain to property management or call the police. Call the police? Please. That wasn't my style. In my world, the first person to call the cops had already lost. So I stood there looking at their garbage and thought, fine. You want trash warfare? I'll show you what truly lethal garbage looks like. I went back inside, took care of business, tied up the bag, and set it gently right outside their door. Even I had to admire the creativity. Competition really did inspire greatness. I almost wanted to knock and thank them for bringing out my best. I went back inside and waited. 10 minutes later their door flew open. The screaming started immediately. I nearly choked trying not to laugh. A second later they were hammering on my door. I opened it and found the whole family there this time, husband, wife, and their son. Even the kid looked annoying. He had one of those mean little faces that just made you want to slap something. While his parents cursed me out, the little brat actually tried to rush me. I kicked him away, shut the door in all their faces, and let them pound as long as they wanted. They screamed for 10 solid minutes before calling property management up. The second staff arrived, the two of them transformed into respectable middle-class victims and started accusing me of everything imaginable. They said I had thrown human waste, assaulted their child, maybe I was even some kind of killer. Then in the same breath, they complained that staff hadn't removed their garbage quickly enough. It was incredible. The property guy eventually knocked on my door too, but I had the TV on and ignored him. By the time the noise died down, I had already finished 2 episodes of the knockout. When I finally opened my door again, the hallway was spotless. Trash gone. My little gift gone. Everything scrubbed clean. Property management had done the dirty work. I stood there staring at the clean hallway feeling oddly disappointed. Honestly, I had been looking forward to more. For the next 2 days, though, there was nothing outside their door. No garbage. No drama. It seemed they had figured out they'd run into someone just as rotten as they were and had decided to pause the war. But I knew better. With people like that, the real fight never started with the first insult. The real fight started when you went on offense. And soon enough, they gave me the opening. They used to leave a few pairs of shoes outside their door, but after the garbage incident there were suddenly more and more. Not just everyday shoes either. Fancy shoes. Kids' shoes. Off-season shoes. Shoes they clearly didn't even wear. Sometimes their son would kick one so hard it landed outside my door. That made me happier than I care to admit. I ordered a jar of itching powder online using a burner account. When it arrived, I waited until late at night, slipped outside, and dusted every single pair. Then I went home and lay in bed too excited to sleep. By morning, I had barely dozed off when furious pounding shook my door. I opened it and nearly burst out laughing. The wife was bent over scratching at her feet while waving a shoe in my face, demanding to know if I'd put something in them. Her skin was already red from clawing at it. I didn't even get a chance to answer before I laughed. That was enough for her. She started shrieking that they had already let the earlier incident go and I was shamelessly refusing to let them live in peace. She called me wicked, heartless, cursed my whole family, and carried on like she was starring in a daytime soap. That was when something in me snapped. I looked at her face, that ugly, raging face, and before I even thought it through, I slapped her. Hard. The sound cracked through the hallway. She just stood there for a second, stunned, then dropped to the ground. She forgot all about scratching. And I have to admit, it felt incredible. Hitting a woman wasn't exactly noble. But I was never pretending to be noble. I whistled toward the apartment and my dog came running out. He lunged toward her barking like mad. Smart dog though, he didn't actually bite. He just scared her half to death. She finally scrambled up, shrieking, and slammed herself back into her apartment. A second later her husband started pounding on my door and screaming that he was going to kill me. That was the first time the police got involved. By the time I opened the door, the husband was red-eyed and trying to shove past the officers to get at me. His wife's cheek was still flushed from where I'd slapped her, and she was already crying to the police that she felt dizzy, that maybe she had a concussion, that rich people in the news had paid millions for less, and I should hand over my apartment. I almost laughed in her face. The husband kept shouting, "You hit my wife. I'll kill you." I said, "You touched me once, and do you know how much that'll cost you?" The cops asked me directly whether I had hit her. I said no. The couple nearly exploded. But there were no cameras in the hallway. No witnesses willing to speak. Nothing they could use. The wife insisted on DNA testing, ranting that if my palm had hit her face then my DNA had to be on her skin. I asked the police if that made any sense. One of them sighed and said, "In theory." I grinned and said, "Ma'am, you really watch too much TV." That set them off again. But the police clearly understood by then that this was lowlife versus lowlife, and they weren't getting a clean answer from anybody. Neighbors started peeking out, whispering, and some of them quietly told the officers what kind of people the family across from me had always been. Eventually, the cops settled for mediation and ordered us all back inside. Before he left, the husband pointed at me and said, "From today on, you won't have a good day in your life." I smiled and sent the police on their way. Back inside, petting my dog, I did realize one thing. By slapping the wife, I had escalated things. If this couple had any pride at all, the next move wouldn't be small. I waited. 3 days passed with nothing. Then, on Saturday night, while I was walking my dog downstairs, he kept spotting pieces of sausage along the road and trying to eat them. I dragged him away each time, thinking maybe they were spoiled. When I got back to the building, there was a crowd gathered around one of the owners from the 3rd floor. He was kneeling on the ground, clutching his dead dog and sobbing. I asked what happened. He said the dog had eaten sausage from outside. The police came. They tested the pieces. Pesticide. Someone had deliberately laced them. Security footage showed who had thrown them out. The little brat from across the hall. And suddenly everything made sense. That family hadn't just wanted to annoy me. They had wanted to poison my dog. They just didn't care if somebody else's dog died first. The police went upstairs, but there wasn't much they could do. The parents insisted their son had just been playing around. They didn't seem all that upset that a dog was dead. The owner from the 3rd floor was heartbroken, but he didn't dare pick a fight with that family. He buried his dog and swallowed it. I couldn't. This had been aimed at me. And if they thought hiding behind their son would protect them, then they had badly misunderstood the kind of person they were dealing with. I spent that night asking around about the kid's school. By midnight, I had his elementary school, his class, and half a dozen stories about what a little tyrant he was. Stealing snacks. Taking money from classmates. Bullying girls. Pinching a top student hard enough to leave marks because she wouldn't let him copy homework. His parents had once stormed into the school and bullied another family into backing down. Perfect. A snake raised by snakes. So I called a few old friends, men who were no more respectable than I was, and through them I found several troublemaking boys from the middle school division. I paid each of them 500 yuan. I had one instruction. Make that kid too scared to go to school. They understood immediately. The next day, I walked my dog downstairs and waited. Sure enough, the kid came home crying, one side of his face swollen from a slap so hard it looked painted on. He saw me staring at him and ran for the stairs. I followed him up just slowly enough to hear the screaming start once he got inside. His mother was already calling the school, shrieking about bullying and justice. I leaned against the wall outside my own door and smiled. For the next week, those middle school boys took turns. Tuesday his nose was bloodied. Wednesday one eye had turned black. Thursday his ear was swollen. By the end of the week, the little king of the classroom was flinching every time someone looked at him. His parents raised hell at the school. Nothing changed. Finally, with half a month still left before winter break, they pulled him out and kept him home. That was satisfying in a way very few things are. They had tried to poison my dog. Now their precious son was too afraid to go to school. Fair was fair. A few quiet days passed. Then one night around 9, the husband started pounding on my door again. This time I opened it with my phone already recording. He pointed at me and said, "I know those little thugs who beat my son were hired by you." I put on my best blank expression. "I have no idea what you're talking about." He was furious. He kept challenging me to fight him face to face like a man. That was boring. I just shut the door on him. Apparently that pushed him to get creative. Late that night, he dragged his speaker into the hallway and set it right outside his apartment facing mine. Then he started blasting music. Cheap, loud, brainless stuff. The kind of songs you'd hear at a public square dance or a carnival held in hell. Neighbors came out to complain, but nobody dared knock on his door. I could have done something right away. But timing matters. He let it run until almost 2 in the morning. Then, once he'd finally gone back inside to sleep, I made my move. I owned a small but powerful subwoofer, and my apartment door had one of those old peepholes that could swing open into a tiny window. I taped the speaker over the opening, hit play, and let funeral music roar into the hallway. Not regular funeral music either. The kind that sounded like a whole nation grieving. At 2 in the morning, it was magnificent. The couple across the hall came storming out immediately and started cursing me for disturbing the peace. That was rich. I put on headphones, watched TV, and let the speaker keep working. The next morning, they still hadn't called the police, which honestly surprised me. It meant they really wanted to beat me at my own game. Fine. So I kept going. I alternated between funeral music and obnoxious dance tracks all day, put the subwoofer on a power strip so it could run nonstop, then got on my motorcycle and went back to my parents' house to let the whole building suffer in my absence. 3 days later, the police finally tracked down my number and ordered me back to shut it off. When I returned, they were waiting at the door. The husband's speaker was gone. The officers told me he had been the one to report me for disturbing the peace. I almost admired the shamelessness. After all his talk about handling things man to man, he had caved first. The officers warned me not to pull a stunt like that again. I promised solemnly. They left. The family across the hall never came out. They were hiding. And that gave me an idea. The husband owned a flower, bird, and pet shop. I remembered that clearly. I also remembered something from when I was a kid. People who raise songbirds care about one thing almost more than beauty. The bird's voice. A good bird with a clean, pretty song can be worth serious money. But birds can learn ugly sounds. Harsh sounds. Dirty calls. Cawing, croaking, ugly wild noises that ruin the bird's value if it picks them up and can't stop repeating them. Bird owners hate that more than almost anything. So I dug out an old Bluetooth speaker, downloaded a collection of the nastiest bird calls I could find, and followed the husband to his shop one morning. It was bigger than I expected. A full stall in the flower and bird market with dozens of expensive birds inside. I waited outside until noon. Once he stepped out, leaving only 2 tired employees behind, I walked in like any other customer, drifted around the shop, found a blind spot between potted plants, and tucked the speaker behind a display. Then I walked out. From outside, I connected through Bluetooth and turned the volume all the way up. Chaos. Within seconds, the whole place sounded like a swamp full of dying crows. Bird after bird started mimicking the ugly calls. The employees panicked, trying to find the source, knocking over pots, grabbing cages, covering them, uncovering them, running around like lunatics. By the time the husband came racing back into the shop, the damage was done. A dozen birds had already picked it up. Maybe more. I watched him from outside as he nearly lost his mind. Then I put my phone back in my pocket and left. One trip. One hidden speaker. Several tens of thousands of yuan gone. That night they were pounding on my door again. The husband was holding my Bluetooth speaker in one hand and his phone in the other. He said he had reviewed footage and knew it was me. I shrugged. Then called the police. You cost me tens of thousands. Sounds rough, I said. Then I lifted my phone to record and added, but if you hit me, you'll lose even more. They raged outside for another 10 minutes after I shut the door. All I said through the wood was, keep going. I'd love to. The next morning, I went down to the garage and found my motorcycle smashed up. Headlight shattered. Tire slashed. License plate gone. I actually laughed. It was obviously them. And honestly, I was disappointed. After all the damage I'd done to them, this was the best they could come up with? A few thousand yuan in repairs? It almost felt insulting. But it gave me inspiration. If they wanted to ruin a vehicle, I'd show them what real vehicle destruction looked like. I borrowed a car from a friend, bought a bag of sugar, and spent 3 days tailing the husband. Finally, he drove to a sketchy massage parlor on the edge of town and parked his Land Cruiser in a quiet back area a little distance away. He got out looking nervous and disappeared inside. I moved fast. I popped the hood, opened the engine, and poured in the sugar. Once it heated and melted, it would gum up the entire system, destroy the engine, and leave him with a repair bill so nasty it would feel like losing half the car. Insurance wouldn't touch it either. That was the beautiful part. When he came back out a couple of hours later, he started the SUV, drove less than 100 yards, and then smoke started pouring out from under the hood. He jumped out in total confusion. I was already driving away laughing. 3 days later, I went back home. No pounding on the door. No fresh threats. No retaliation. That bothered me. People don't just let go of that kind of hatred. Not after a business loss, not after a dead engine, not after having their family humiliated again and again. No, if they had gone quiet, it meant they were planning something bigger. And I couldn't wait. So I prepared. I made a few calls to my old friends, kept my schedule normal, and acted like I had no idea what was coming. Then, on Wednesday night around 10, I was walking home through a narrow alley with a bag of fruit in one hand when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned. The husband was there. And he had brought backup. Several thick-built men with clubs. Just like I knew he would. He walked up and slapped me hard across the face. That one actually stung. I clutched my cheek and put on my best innocent expression. Why'd you hit me? He pulled out a stick and snarled, you ruined my shop. You ruined my car. Do you know what that engine costs? Tonight if I don't break both your legs, I'm not a man. I kept pretending. Didn't you smash my motorcycle first? I was only giving back what I got. That made him even angrier. He shouted, that cheap motorcycle isn't worth anything. I said, that's not the point. You smashed mine because I didn't have a car. If I had a car, you'd have smashed that too, right? I ruined yours because you didn't have a motorcycle. He almost choked on rage. Then he shouted for the men to hit me. That was my cue. I pulled a pepper spray canister from my pocket, the kind I'd been carrying around for 3 days waiting for this exact moment, and emptied it straight into their faces. They hadn't even lifted their clubs yet before they were howling, clawing at their eyes, stumbling all over themselves. I gave a sharp whistle. From the mouth of the alley, more than 20 of my friends came rushing in. Guys I had known since childhood. I had told them to come empty-handed. No weapons. No extra charges. But that didn't stop them from being effective. They swarmed the men on the ground and started kicking. 5 full minutes. Hard. By the end of it, the husband was begging. I finally stepped in, kicked him once in the backside for good measure, and yelled, "That's enough. Move." We scattered in every direction like we always used to. No evidence. No neat little package for the police. Still, I was nervous for a while. If the cops really started pulling on threads, there was always some risk. But 2 hours passed. Nothing. Then I realized the truth. He wouldn't dare call them. Because he had been the one who brought men to jump me. He had gotten beaten at his own game. And now all he could do was swallow it. Or so I thought. Around midnight, his wife posted in the apartment owner's group chat. It started with photos. Her husband in the hospital, both arms wrapped, forehead cut open, looking like some tragic victim in a made-for-TV drama. Their son was in one shot too, clutching him with tearful eyes like the child in a public service announcement. Then came the essay. A long, dramatic, self-righteous essay about how I had bullied their kind and honest family, ambushed her hard-working husband, and turned the neighborhood into a nightmare. She begged the community to stand with them and condemn me. And for a little while, it worked. Some neighbors who didn't really know them started posting sympathy and outrage. I didn't answer at first. I figured she assumed I was collecting screenshots and planning some serious rebuttal. She had clearly forgotten who she was dealing with. When the chat finally slowed down, I sent one line. "If you say one more word, I'll wipe out your whole family." Silence. Total, immediate, glorious silence. It was like the entire group could suddenly see me sitting there with a machete in my lap. Then something unexpected happened. A neighbor from our building typed, "They're lying. That family has made this whole building miserable for years." Another chimed in. Then another. Soon half the building was telling stories about the family across from me, garbage, noise, bullying, threats, all of it. The tide turned so fast it was almost beautiful. Nobody praised me exactly. But I didn't need that. I only needed them to lose. And even then, those lunatics still tried to keep fighting. They uploaded a ridiculous video from the hospital. The husband and wife sat there with their son between them, looking solemn, declaring that they would continue the struggle against evil to the end, that justice would prevail, that heaven protects the good. At the end, their son even spat at the camera. That made me laugh so hard I nearly dropped my phone. But watching them sitting there, united like some ridiculous little fortress, I did have one thought. Fine. You want to act like your strength comes from being united? Then I'll split you apart. That became my final plan. I had 2 people in mind immediately. One was an old female friend of mine, wild, fearless, rich enough not to care, the kind of woman who had been smoking and drinking since middle school and treated men like disposable toys. Put her in a school uniform, and she could still pass for some innocent little dream girl if she wanted. The other was a male friend so ridiculously handsome it was almost offensive. He had done every kind of shady job imaginable, and for 3 years he had worked in a high-end club charming women for money. If seduction was a profession, he had tenure. My strategy was simple. My female friend would lure the husband. My male friend would lure the wife. Then, when the time was right, I'd arrange for the husband to catch the wife in the act. No amount of group chat righteousness survives that. My female friend went first. She started visiting the husband's flower shop dressed like a shy college girl, asking sweet questions about plants and admiring everything he said. Within a week he was giving her gifts, sending flowers to her place himself, basking in the attention like a dog in a patch of sunlight. She let him believe she was interested. She gave him just enough. He was halfway gone already. The wife was harder. My handsome friend visited her clothing store several times pretending to shop for his girlfriend. She noticed him, of course. Any woman would. But she kept her distance. So I adjusted the strategy. I told him to bring an attractive girl into the store and act affectionate in front of the wife. Jealousy would do what flirting alone couldn't. It worked. The wife's whole demeanor changed. Then one Friday she went to Guangzhou to buy stock. My friend followed. He arranged a chance encounter, dinner, drinks, nostalgia, chemistry. By the end of the night, they had crossed the line. He sent me video. I laughed so hard I nearly fell off my sofa. The trap was set. All I had to do now was choose the moment to pull it shut. That Saturday, my handsome friend met the wife again. I followed from a distance and filmed everything. A little later, I sent the husband the video along with the exact address. He arrived furious, bringing 2 men with him. He stormed into the room like a bomb going off. My friend saw it coming. He pulled out pepper spray, the same beautiful invention that had served me so well, and blasted all 3 of them before they could do much more than shout. Meanwhile, my female friend arrived with 2 police officers not far behind. I brought them upstairs. When the cops stepped into the wrecked room and saw the husband swinging, the wife screaming, the place in ruins, the situation was obvious enough. Domestic chaos, trespassing, violence. They hauled the husband upright and informed him he was looking at serious trouble for breaking in and attacking people. He was still half blind from the spray, blinking and swearing and trying to understand what was happening. Then my female friend, just to make sure the knife twisted properly, played the video for the wife too. That was when the whole thing truly exploded. The wife lunged at her husband. The husband started roaring back. The room dissolved into screaming, accusations, grabbing, shoving, pure madness. And I leaned in the doorway watching the whole thing like a man admiring fireworks he'd built himself. 3 days later, my female friend went to the police and admitted she had overreacted and didn't want to pursue things further. The husband was eventually released. I waited at home. I knew what would happen next. A marriage like that, already rotten to the core, doesn't survive humiliation piled on top of betrayal piled on top of public disgrace. Sure enough, the night he came back, their apartment erupted. Crashes. Shouting. Things breaking. The son crying. Plates smashing. Furniture going over. The whole building came out into the hallway this time, not because anyone wanted to help, but because nobody was scared of them anymore. They had lost that power. The fight went on for nearly 2 hours. Finally, the husband staggered out. His face was covered in fresh scratches and blood. Inside, the wife sat on the floor clutching their son, hair a mess, face bruised, looking like a storm had passed through and chosen her as its center. A month later, they moved out quietly. No speeches. No revenge. No comeback. They just left. And nobody in the building ever saw them again. That should have been the end of it. And maybe for a better man, it would have been. But I'm not a better man. So even after they were gone, I kept thinking about the whole thing. The garbage. The poison. The noise. The shop. The car. The alley. The group chat. The final split. All of it. People like to say evil gets punished sooner or later. I don't know about that. What I do know is this. Bullies usually thrive because everyone else is decent. Everyone else has limits. Everyone else wants peace more than victory. That family across the hall had spent years counting on that. They bullied weak neighbors, threw tantrums, made threats, and got away with it because most people didn't want the headache. Then they met me. And the truth is, I wasn't stronger than them because I was smarter, richer, or more righteous. I beat them because I was worse. Meaner. More patient. More shameless. They wanted to play dirty. I wanted to play until nobody could stand up anymore. I'm not telling this story because I think I'm some kind of hero. I'm not. I'm the villain who happened to be standing in the right hallway at the right time. But every now and then, when I'm walking my dog past that now quiet corridor, I look at the empty apartment across from mine and still feel a little warm inside. Because I know exactly what happened. A family of bastards ran into a bastard who enjoyed the game more than they did. And in the end, they were the ones who couldn't take it.